Hello, welcome everyone. This session will be in English because you won't like my French. Hope that's okay. We have 20 minutes to run a session which I usually do in about 45, so this will be fast and accurate. And to see that you're awake, I will tell you there is a spelling mistake in this session. And we'll see who's the first one to spot it. Okay, my name is Mattias. I work for a company called CRISP. And we help companies improve their practices and improve software development. That's what we do. I typically coach Lean and Kanban. So I'm going to tell you a story. And the story starts with a company. It's a gaming company who has two sets of operations. You have the operations department, physically placed in one place. There are 3 teams. And they're working separately from the development department, which is approximately 10 teams. Now, during the course of 1.5 years, this happened. First, relations started to emerge between operations and development. Before, there were 2 separate entities. People started to know a bit about the problems in each area. And then, within 1.5 years, operations actually positioned themselves physically inside the development department. They actually moved and placed themselves in the midst of the developers. Now, why did this happen? And what caused that? So this is part of the story I'm going to tell you about. The story is that the development department had started to adopt some agile practices, and they got some value out of this. They start to ship software out very quickly. And when 10 teams suddenly start ship software very quickly out, there is someone who starts to get in trouble. And that is operations, because they need to take care of this software. At least it was in this way in this company. So they started to see this flood of software coming down their way, and they was wondering, how are we going to manage this? And how are we going to do that, given the constraints that we have? Now, so they ask themselves, what can we learn from Agile, or what can we do to help ourselves improve? Now, in this process, I walked and asked the developers and the operations department what they thought of each other, and this is what they told me. The operations people said that the developers aren't caring about the technology improvements or the platform improvements that they could deploy, and these could give them great benefits that will reduce our pain. But they don't really seem to care a lot about these things, and they aren't listening. The developer says, well, operations people, you know, when you try to get some help out of them, it's very hard. You send tickets into their Jira systems, and they seem to stay there. And when the solution arrives, it's not what I wanted. And it's very hard to get help. I have to push really hard to a lot of people to get my wheel through. Why is this so heavy? But the thing is, when you actually get to talk to them, they're actually really competent when it comes to infrastructure improvements. Right? These guys are skilled, but it just doesn't seem to work. Now, the predominant paradigm here is that they need to change. And this is what you could see in both areas. The developer thought that operations need to do differently, and so did operations. So, when we started this work, we started to ask ourselves a couple of questions. Because we didn't ask ourselves in the first place, we need to do Kanban. We asked ourselves a set of questions. First, can technical operations be viewed as a flow problem? Given the fact this very interrupt-controlled nature, that things change really rapidly, priorities change really rapidly, can it be viewed as a flow problem? Is there things that we can learn from that? Can we get teamwork special benefits when we have such a high specialization? When each person that works in operations is a true master in his own field, but how can they really work in a team environment? Well, we didn't know, but we asked ourselves this question to see if we could find this out. Can we do continuous improvement in operations? Is that even possible? Well, we didn't know, but we ask ourselves, can we find out? So this is the journey that we set off. So the first, here you see some. So one of the things that we found that could match to these answering this question was Kanban. So this should be a really neat board visualizing a flow, visualizing work that is being done. What does it make for a tool to be called Kanban? Well, there are actually three things that needs to be there. First, you have to be able to visualize the workflow. Okay. It has to be visual somewhere. Secondly, you need to have a way that you balance demand against capacity. The way that we do that is that we imply work in progress limits, and this is the numbers that you see on the board. This basically means, the work in progress limit basically means that we do work until we reach this limit, but no more. So this helps, for example, a team to focus, and this helps also to surface constraints. Now, when you see this board, how many of you see just a visual board? Okay. This is not what I see, and this is not what I've learned. This is not only a visual board, this is a tool for incremental improvement. And how do you expect incremental improvement to happen? Well, consider this. What is going to happen the moment when the team can't do one more story? There is a decision that needs to be made, right? There is some discovery that needs to be made. There is some communication that needs to be done. So this is what starts to drive questions and improvements. This session is about Kanban operations, but I've learned during the last couple of years that this can work equally well to drive incremental improvements also in software development and other areas outside software. So this is Kanban in a nutshell. Three very basic, simple rules that you can apply to your existing organization. Why that is important? It means that you don't need to change the way that you work today. You can start where you are. So how do we go about? So we had this problem. We tried to see if we could use Kanban as a tool to do these improvements. Well, the first thing we did was sketch a Kanban board. And this is the board that we used. And to tell you the truth, we didn't know what the final board would look like when we started. So we started with one version, and what we learned is that that version would improve and change rapidly during the upcoming 3 or 4 weeks. So the original design would typically not stay original, it would quickly change. But this is the board that we start using. And what happened is that flow flowed from bottom to top. So that was a flow value. And secondly, we had prioritization, which went from left to right. So this meant that when a team member in operations wanted to do a piece of work, he'd go check the board and would see, what's down at the bottom left that needs to be done right now. And if there's nothing there, he would work his way towards the right. When we started, we didn't know what the perfect design of the board was, and we didn't really care that much. We wanted to get going. So we get to design together with the manager, asking him to say, what's the biggest piece of work that we do, and what are the priorities? And we sketched the design, and what we learned is that design changed quickly, rapidly, during the upcoming weeks. Just to tell you that the way that we employed work in progress limits was across the whole Kanban board. So there was a total work in progress limit that existed across the board. Here you see an example of how things started to change, and especially when I'm talking about the board design. So this is how we got going with the database team, and the small pink or orange, I'll say, notes on top, they are the priorities. So we learned very quickly that it was very when we wanted to change the priorities, it was very cumbersome to change the columns altogether. So we started just changing stickers on top of the columns to know what the right priorities are. And typically, after a couple of weeks, these priorities settled, and then we will settle the design of the board. One of the things that we tried to do all the way was to involve the managers. And this turned out to be really important for operations. We found out it was very important to involve them because we needed their help to solve problems. And to solve problems that existed not only in operations, but basically had relations to software development process or to other areas. And it took time to solve this, and we needed the managers' help to solve them. But all through this process, the managers were tightly involved in this process. And they were also stakeholders into doing improvements. Because they had a goal in this. They themselves wanted operations team to work better. They wanted to give improved possibilities of the people in the team to grow. And they wanted to do less of like daily prioritization. They wanted to do improvements targeted at the future to a bit higher scale. But all through this, they were involved. Now, what you see in this picture is a manager who is actually putting up the Kanban board for one of the teams. So he's the one with the screwdriver. And what happened was that we had no place to put the Kanban board. There was no area. So he took he took 4 pieces of furniture, and he put the Kanban board on the back of those pieces of furniture. But he solved the problem to get the Kanban board in place. So how did we work? Well, we tried doing this. As a manager, the primary responsibility was to keep prioritization and solve prioritization conflicts and add new projects to the team or remove projects. Also checking how the progress was going and be the one that would be alerted if we had problems, that would try to get the problem solved. One of the important things that we asked the managers to do was not only to give the project to the team, but also tell why the projects were important. So for each project, they had to state what is the reason for this project. For the team, they decided how and when to do the work. So the team self-organized their work towards this Kanban board. They also had the possibility to add own stories to the Kanban board, as long as they were below a certain limit, which we set to 2 days of work. And the reason for this, I will show you later, was because we gave them, we implemented a change. We said that each person in the sysadmin team would be a contact person, a dedicated contact person to a development team. And this meant that we need to give them some leeway into add stories that would help the development teams without have to move all the way through the manager. So on a weekly basis, the team would break down new projects, do estimate if needed, and do a continuous improvement. And on a daily basis, they would just go to the board, look at the flow, ask what are the blockers that are preventing this, and get some help from the manager if needed to solve this blockage. So what did we learn? First, number 1, fewer projects meant faster flow. So in one location, for the database team, the team was basically 7 persons, and they were running 5 projects when we started. So when we started, I asked the manager, is this a good limit? Is this good to have 5 projects running? And he said, well, maybe it's not good, but I don't think I can do anything about it. All of this needs to be done. So I thought that maybe we should do less, but I said, let's leave it to that, and let's learn what is right. Now, what happened was that during the period of 2 or 3 weeks, he saw that we got progress on maybe 1 or 2 of the products, but the other 3, nothing happened. So what he did was he said, this is not so smart. I'll remove the last 3 projects from the team's Kanban board and say, you don't need to care about this. And what happened was that the other projects started to move through real fast. And they started to move through so fast that we actually stopped doing estimations on the majority of the projects. Why did we stop doing estimations? Well, we all did estimations when we started, but why did we stop doing it? Basically because we didn't need it. We didn't need it anymore. The managers learned that we would ship projects faster than anyone started to ask for them. And when we did that, estimations was no longer required. What was required was that we have a thorough understanding what needed to be done in the project, but not the actual size of that. So we would only do estimation if there were a real tangible risk approach with a project. Otherwise than that, we'd stop doing estimations. I mentioned that we did several flow redesigns of the board. And thirdly, constraints started to emerge. Constraints that previously have been hidden. Things like, I can't start this piece of work because I need the help from Alan in this team, and he's not available. Things like that started to emerge. And the manager had to start to work to solve these things. And when some of this magic started to happen was when the manager found out that he had built enough trust to shift some of the work to other teams or change policies of how the work was going. So, for example, work that one team was doing could be shifted to another team because they realized that it was very big overhead to share it between the teams. Things like that started to emerge. So, what you see is not always, what we see is what we can improve. So this is the Kanban board of system administration team. So it has several columns, and it has a release column, which means primarily help doing releases. Then it has support, which is help the software development teams. Then it's unplanned. Now this unplanned column was all the work that we didn't know. There's probably a bunch of things that we don't know about. Do you see what the majority of work is? This was a big surprise to both the team and the manager. So what happened is that the manager started asking, why is this work all there? And he started to ask and question whether this should be there or not, and if to move the project or which we shouldn't do it. But the key is that this was invisible before. So what did we learn and what did we do? Well, one of the things that helped us a lot was that we established something called one sysadmin per team. This meant that for each development team, they had a dedicated contact within operations. Someone, a person, a face, someone they could call. The operations in the beginning resisted this change because they were uncertain of how this would affect their ability to plan and their ability to deal with overtime and late night availabilities. But then one day, one of the managers said, well, I'm going to give this a try and see if this helps. And he started doing it. And it turned out to work really, really well. And the way it worked really well was because it cut out all these feedback loops and said that if you have a problem, there's someone you can call. And that person started to learn about the development team's contexts. So typically what happened was that we would get custom communication protocols evolving. Things like, for this development team, we prefer to talk Jabber. We do Jabber because they know about what's going on, and okay, it's simple. For this guy, I need to call him because the English is, from my perspective, partly broken. I don't understand him when he writes. And for a third guy, it would say, well, I need to do email because email is the only way that he will, really articulate what he needs. So custom communication protocols evolve between different development teams and different people in operations. We learned very quickly that problems were not isolated to organization boundaries. And this was especially the case for operations. If they needed to improve something, typically what would happen is that the problem needed to get help from other parts of the company. Like, if you have a performance problem, you can't solve it yourself. It's pretty hard to solve the problem yourself. You need help from one or two people, one or two teams to get that. And we learned that to get this help was important in solving the problems. Otherwise, they would just stay. So how did we do that? Well, we put 2 slots out of each manager's door, which says that your manager is going to work on 2 problems at a time. If you have more problem than that, well, you can replace one of the existing problems with the new one, but there's actually only 2 problems. But those 2 problems will stay until they are solved. So the rules was, the manager had two slots at any single point of time. If they were full, they could replace it if there was a more important one from the team's perspective, and the team decided when the issue was solved. It was really important. And this started the change in the team's mindset. Because no longer did they think that problems would get buried or hidden or forgotten, but they will actually stay there until they were solved. And we learned that in the beginning, problem needed persistence to be solved. They wouldn't just be solved because we started a piece of work. They will be solved because we were persistent about them. So did we get somewhere? Yes. 3 months after we started, the sysadmin was awarded the best performing team. And also, what happens after 4 months is the development opened a support channel for production disturbances, which said that operations could call one development team and just get straight on help if there was a production problem. Before, they resisted this because they were saying that we're typically in a sprint, we're doing something else, so you will have to wait. But they said, we'll have enough trust in you to get this in place. The team started to learn about how the velocity and how variations started to affect their work. This is from the DBA team. And what you see is 2 graphs. One is velocity, which is the thorough line. And one of the dotted line is the number of small interruptions that they get. And if you check the lines, you will see that they actually correlate. So there's one extreme data point in the beginning, which is Christmas, but other than that, they actually correlate. And this is what the team started to discover by themselves. The problem is not always where you think. I showed you this, and this happened again and again. So this is a sample of where all the problems, or most of the work that the team was doing that was extremely busy, was the low priority work, which is the bottom side of the board. This team resisted to change because they said we were very busy, but when you see what they were busy with, you see that we're busy doing the wrong type of work. So can technical operation be viewed as a flow problem? Oh yes. Do you have less work? It moves faster. And this is how they work today. Thanks for listening in. I think time's up.